All right, this episode of the Spiritable podcast was a particularly fun one where we had some disagreements and some good times with our friend Wes Lockard. Here's on his third roundabout with us, and we talked about justice and what that looks like in the age of righteous retribution on the internet.
Yeah, we talked about sort of the dangers of that, but also we talked about when is physical exertion of justice justified. We talked about punching a Nazi and whether that's okay or not.
And a little lighter, sillier things like trauma and how that affects your brain and your brain chemistry.
Lighthearted stuff. A lot of rabbit holes we explore. We won't give away our conclusions because you got to watch and listen to the end.
Check it out.
Hi, I'm Luke.
I'm Richard.
And this is the Spiritable podcast.
We're having conversations about big spiritual, moral, and social issues in hopefully a more grounded way.
We talk a lot from the religious philosophy of this guy, Emanuel Swedenborg, and our own twist on Christianity. Check out episode 9 for more on that.
But of course, we don't have all the answers, so we like to bring on guests with their own philosophies.
Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, atheist, etc.
To help get new perspectives and to challenge each other's beliefs.
Everyone has some relationship with spirituality, but for some dumb reason it can be hard to talk about.
And everyone's experience with life is going to be a little different, and that's what makes it so interesting.
So, thanks for joining us on Spiritable. We're here with Wes Lockard, who has been on our show twice before, correct? This is your thrice time.
Third time's a charm, so you better be charming.
Yes, step it up.
Will I be? Who knows? Probably
Watch
not.
the end to find out. All right, so Wes, if you had to give a 3-sentence summary about where you're at in your spiritual process, what you think, spirituality is all about, what'd you say?
I think it's definitely... I'm not anti-religion or spirituality at all, and I definitely think it has its place. I think the best term to describe me would probably be agnostic.
I think that's what you kind of described yourself as last time.
Yeah, I could see I'm not so blind or narrow-minded as to not see myself maybe being religious again in real life. I mean, all it takes is one
in real life?
Almost running someone over that I just almost did driving here because they're walking along.
Yeah, there are a lot of people walking along.
Yeah.
Can't forget a dodge.
When there's a sidewalk, too. Use the sidewalk. Don't walk down the street when it's dusk.
And that's our topic for today.
Sorry. So, all it takes is one near-death experience, and then you're instantly again. So, at least that's
Is that what you're waiting on? You're
yeah.
I'll just wait until I have
I'm
a
just
near-death
banking on
experience. God will speak to me. I'll be good to go.
Yeah, so I'm open to it. I like talking about it, but right now I'd definitely say more kind of agnostic.
What would you say, and maybe we'll cut this, but what would you say your most negative religious experience was? If you could pinpoint one thing.
Oh, wow. Jeez, that's a really good question, actually. I think when I had someone I was very, very close with that died, a lot of people's reactions to it that I know they were coming from a place of trying to be supportive or caring, but a lot of what the way they would phrase their attempts to comfort me, I found not so much disingenuous as almost irrelevant, and these people are making all of these assumptions about my life when they come up to me and just say, oh, don't worry because X, Y, and Z.
When you don't ascribe to whatever they're saying is.
And like I said, I wasn't ugh, you suck, you jerk, how dare you? But it definitely... I think in that same position, a lot of people would derive a lot of comfort from religion in that kind of environment. But for me, it made me very uncomfortable just due to certain people's behavior and the general attitude, I think. Made me uncomfy. So.
Yeah. Is that a humility thing where the people saying that kind of stuff seem like they're coming from a sort of high ground where they're well, I know what's happening to your friend who passed away.
Definitely.
But
that's not all of it.
Assuming that you think that too.
There is a huge component of that, of belief forcing there where it's oh, don't worry, they're in a better place, or they just go off about something that's deeply ingrained to their very specific Catholic belief or whatever, and I'm just whoa, how do we... You could just say sorry, and I get it. I mean, it's at a wedding. You don't know what to say. You're kind of floundering.
It's also this is not the place I want to be in to have an argument about this right now.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't want to talk about... Not the time
and place to really have that kind of discussion.
Right. And also, you're coming up to me to say, I'm sorry for your loss, and then launch into your beliefs about what's going on. And it's you don't see the problem there?
Yeah, it seems like a time to listen, not to...
Yeah. It just felt Again, far be it for me to say like, oh, you don't care or anything. And I know in their hearts, like they're just floundering to talk about anything because they're very uncomfortable too. But yeah, it just feels more, I guess, selfish in certain instances. Yeah. Not everyone who said, God bless or anything about heaven, I was like, ugh. It was a very select few.
Yeah.
And that might not have even been like an actively selfish thing, but not like a consciously thoughtful thing, which is what a person needs.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like I said, you come up and say, I'm sorry, and then I immediately like, oh, you don't actually care about what I have to say about this, or like you don't want to listen to me, you just want to kind of monologue about what happened to you, and then they launch into their experiences and go, oh, I can relate, blah, 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 here's my story. I'm like, I don't want to hear your story right now. I'm dealing with a big thing in my life. Yeah. I'm happy to hear it later, but not right here, right now. Like, this is not the time. Which is I don't know, maybe that's like even wrong on my part to say like, it's all about me and like the like family and people really involved with this situation. But at the same time, I think it kind of is. It's like,
Yeah, I don't think it's wrong to not be able to handle someone else's story when you're dealing with trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird that people feel like when someone's going through something really, really hard, I think it's a sort of a knee-jerk reaction to feel like, oh, well, if they just know that I understand by telling them what I went through, then they'll be okay. And there is something to not feeling alone in something. But if you don't listen to them, then they still feel alone because no one has heard them.
And you never know how someone's going to receive something or what they need in a scenario. So most people are just taking their best guess, but not going in trying to listen. They're trying to assert something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you never know how someone's going to take something, but I think generally if you're just there to listen, I don't think you can really go wrong with that. If you're really just aiming to listen, like no one's like, how dare you listen to me? Like it's not, no one's ever said that.
I hate being perceived. Sorry, not to interrupt you. I did want to say that is something that I do totally catch myself doing all the time. So I know it's a very natural thing to be like, oh, well, this is my experience with something similar, but I do
That's
at least
how humans relate to each other.
Exactly. I try to be conscious of like what you just said and put in the listening first, and once we've exhausted that, say like, oh, I've gone through something similar, so I know, so I understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're right. Sorry.
No, you're good. So times before with Wes, we talked about internet communities and then the difference between spirituality and religion. They're both super fun chats. And Wes is fun to talk to about culture and kind of different perspectives on people, coming from a sort of different spiritual background. So it's always fun to chat with you about that kind of thing. And I think kind of what we're going into today is a different kind of polarity I think we're seeing online, especially with people's perspectives and points of view. Richard's pretty fired up about it.
This is something that grinds my gears.
Hashtag grinds my gears.
Hashtag grinds my gears. And I don't think we just see it online. I think that it's...
Oh, definitely not just online.
Yeah, I think it's most opaque online. It's most
OP.
It's also easier online because there's the obvious like layer of distance between you and whoever you're yelling.
And anonymity.
Yeah. But we're gonna stop leaving you in the dark, audience. So
no, let's just keep it going. We'll tell them the topic at the end.
Let's describe this in other ways before telling them what it is.
This is a fun segment called Guess the Topic. We won't tell you, but we're gonna talk about it anyways.
So something that I find really frustrating that I see pretty prevalent in culture these days is this idea of like all these, you see it in videos a lot, this like person who did something wrong gets what they deserve. And it's such a common mentality. The like person deserves unhappiness from something they did. Unhappiness is delivered to them, the world rejoices. And it just feels like such a destructive and hateful mentality to me, and such a misuse of an idea of justice that just feels so toxic. And it's everywhere, like, oh, kid who's talking out in class gets decked by his classmate. People are like, yay! And I do that, it's so easy. It's so easy to be like, yeah, I don't like that guy, and he had a bad thing happen to him, so I feel great.
Instant karma, sort of. There's so many like karma compilations on YouTube.
Yeah, or like a car does a stupid move and then immediately the sirens flash on and you're like, yeah! Or like does a stupid move and then immediately crashes and you're like, oh, you deserved that. And it's everywhere. And we see it offline as well. It almost feels like people are like want to lash out at people, but know there's a cultural expectation not to, unless, loophole, they deserve it.
Right.
And so it feels almost like the world is waiting for like people to mess up enough that we can jump on them.
I think those videos are satisfying for people to see, because I think justice in people's lives is way more complicated than these like karma compilations. So like maybe it's a person at work or at school that someone's been really struggling with, and they know there's a bad dude, but they never get what they think they deserve based on their sort of subjective view of justice. So everyone has these sort of annoyances in their own lives, and then it's kind of almost like a vicarious sense of justice to see these little instances played out in different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But
is that destructive? I'm not totally on board with that maybe, but I think that's one aspect of why it's there. I do think it gets toxic when all the commenters are like, this guy is so stupid because of this one very like oversimplified thing that is totally out of context.
And I think even if it's not oversimplified, even if it is like totally legitimately a guy doing a dumb thing or a guy doing a bad thing, I just think there's something inherently wrong with enjoying the pain of another person. It's like distant sadism. It's this really weird, like it feels really grimy to be like, oh man, I'm really glad that person's in pain, either physically or emotionally.
Yeah.
For any reason. It just feels so gross to me.
But then what about like AFV? Like you see like kid
America's
fall over.
Funniest
Yeah,
Videos.
stuff like that. Like you see a kid, the video of, have you seen the one where there's a kid on the porch and he like very shyly hands like sunflower or something to whoever's filming him, and they pan the camera down to take the flower, and they pan it up, and the kid who's just standing still completely like tumbles down the stairs. And it doesn't look like he gets like really seriously injured or anything. He just took a little fall. But it's hilarious.
Well, I don't think you're being like, that kid is a bad person.
No, you're not, but you're still getting enjoyment from someone else being hurt, even if it's in a smaller way. And that's why I say AFV. A lot of that was just people falling in like...
I feel like for me, whenever I watch like those slapstick videos, it always becomes less funny the more like the pain is real.
I agree.
You know, like
Yeah.
if the video goes long enough that like the person doesn't get back up and people are like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Suddenly you stop laughing because you're like, oh wait, that's a real person.
Yeah.
And I think the thing about slapstick is that it's I don't think it's like connecting with an enjoyment of the pain of others. It's more like the visual disparity between what normally happens to a person and what is now happening.
Okay.
Like videos that I will always find too funny are like very small children getting smacked by like very big like exercise balls.
Yeah.
It's always hilarious because it's just like kaboof. And they're usually fine. They get back up and they like giggle about it. But like if that video continued and the kid was like crying on the ground, I wouldn't be like, ah, yeah, that kid's hurt.
I can picture me walking into your guys' place and there's just a kid crying and screaming on the floor. And you're like, yeah,
Woo!
like it's a football game. That's classic Richard.
That's straying away from the sort of justice component.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
I was just hung up on the enjoyment of it because I think there's... I could see you making the same argument about that. You're still getting enjoyment out of it.
But yeah, so I feel like to me there's a distinction between like the enjoying slapstick humor and enjoying and wanting to witness the pain of another person. And
or,
I feel like
or witness the like destruction, not always like physical pain, but like like intelligent, sort of someone being shut down intelligently or like made fun of or something. You know, it happens in a lot of different ways. Like, and you can even see sort of the proof of that in a lot of videos that are titled like Jordan Peterson decks liberal, or like some intellectual wrecks this other person.
Because Jordan Peterson is known for just punching people in the face.
Well, I'm saying, and then you click on it, and it's just like
I know
a pleasant conversation between two people. And like, this title is not at all, but like,
Well,
so,
I mean,
so it's really just trying to pander because it knows that people are going to click on something that is that extreme, you know, or showing that sort
Ben
of
Shapiro
destruction.
literally rips the throat out of a poor little helpless trans girl, and people are like, "Yes, upvoted on Reddit. Give me a reticle now."
No, that's actually probably a title.
I guarantee you it is.
to me, it just feels like, I think I said this already, but a clear misunderstanding of the idea of justice. Because to me, this idea of justice is not like a karma thing, or I guess I want to clarify, like a Western world karma thing.
They got what's coming to them.
Not like the actual or religious origins of karma. But like get what you deserve kind of mentality. I think justice is more about... I think justice inevitably has to look to the end goal of improvement of the situation.
Right.
You know, like if justice is served but no one becomes a better person afterward, yeah, then there's no justice present there.
Yeah, like the justice system, which is just so well known for how it teaches people and rehabs them. Doesn't just put them in a room
our
with
prison rates
violent
are so good right
criminals.
Well,
teach you how to do crimes
now.
better.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think...
Or like high-level executives not going to jail, and then like low-level criminal drug offenses being put in jail. Like,
Constantly.
super makes sense.
All right, that's a tangent for sure.
That's a fun one, though. I like
It
that.
is. But I think this idea of the justice system does highlight that I think people need to focus on justice being for reform, not for punishment.
And I think that nature and the oversimplification of it with the people living vicariously through this instant justice is really bad for society.
Yeah.
Because I think it, on a subconscious level, affects people where they then view the world differently in, oh, this is how things should happen because of these like kind of sickly good feelings I get from watching these things. So I'm kind of looking at life through a different lens now where I wish this instant sort of justice would happen to even these random people who I don't know. Because when you're watching these videos, you don't know these people. You're like, no, they deserved it based on this 1 second interaction.
Right.
So then you, looking with that lens at the rest of the world, are like, oh, I saw this person in the mall do this thing. If all the groceries fell on them, that'd be justice. You know?
Yeah.
It's a weird, twisted lens to look at the world in.
And I think it plays out in the way you actually interact with other people too. I mean, I've dealt with this working with younger people in mentorship roles. This idea of like, exactly what we've been talking about. They did this, so it was justified that I did this to them. And I think there's so much of a cultural push that there is an offense that makes acceptable enjoying to hurt someone else. Like if you offend in this way, I'm just waiting for you to mess up in this way, because then everyone will back me in what I get to do to you.
Right.
And it's this really
Pretty nasty.
twisted cultural thing that I do think plays out in interactions. And I don't think it's a new thing by any means, and it's such an easy way to self-justify being a jerk. Like, oh, well, yeah, I called them that name, but it's because they did this to me. Or even like, oh, because they did that to my friend. And oftentimes we divert it and try to further divert it to be somehow moral, somehow noble. And it's like, and I mean, I do that. Like, I get really defensive when people insult people I care about. I get really defensive about it. And for a long time, I spoke about that as sort of like a moral strength of mine. Like, oh man, if someone said something bad about my sister, like, I'd go for them, or like whatever this idea is. People are like, yeah, wow, you must really care about your family. And that's just, to me, it feels like unclear thought.
Yeah.
Because to do that doesn't solve any situation. It doesn't teach that person not to say mean things about my sister. It teaches that person that now they hate me. And it teaches that person that when other people do things wrong, they are allowed to do things to them.
Yeah.
And it just, it's like a blood feud.
Here's the thing, though. Actual justice, not that fun to watch. Not that clickable. You guys transition. I'm going to go pee. I'll be right back.
What?
You keep talking. It'll be a fun break. And I'll come back. It'll be fun. I'll be right back.
Just two wrongs don't make a right is a trite phrase, but it's true. You know, like...
I totally agree with everything you're saying. I feel like the implication in a lot of the way you're phrasing it is like that these videos have some kind of like causality to it. I feel like they're just like a small subset of a symptom of like a big human tendency.
Yeah, I agree, but I think they reinforce the problem. And so I don't think they're the origin of this problem. I mean, obviously, people post the videos because they know that they're gonna be attractive. But I think they act to reinforce. And like I said, I don't think this is a problem that is in any way new. I mean, if you look at Old Testament times, a lot of the laws are like, hey, here's how much you're allowed to do to someone who wrongs you in this way, because people needed barriers. And then, like, further laws and further religious teaching has added to it, you know, like, love your enemy, hate those who curse you, I love those who curse you or hate you.
You got it.
But so I think that the lesson from the Old Testament is not like, when people do X, we're allowed to do X to them. It's more about our relationship with the divine, and sort of like, if we live a good life, which is following the Lord, good things will happen to us, you know, and not even like in a natural way, like, oh, we'll win the lottery if we're nice, but like, we will feel better about ourselves. We will be happier if we are good to people. And it's sort of like, it's a causality. When we are good, we feel good, long term, sustainably. And when we are bad, that will eventually, it might feel good in the moment, like these videos, but that's a bubble that will eventually break down. Whatever is stopping us from lashing out at a person that we feel has wronged us becomes a little less important the more we sort of glorify this instant brutal justice idea. And so I think it really leads our culture more and more to this idea of like, I am the arbiter of when I am allowed to hurt you. And you have now done the thing that lets me hurt you, and so I will hurt you and everyone will applaud.
Absolutely.
Whether that's true or not, we see that message all around us, and we create that message in ourselves. And I think unless we take efforts to actively push against that, that's where we just naturally head.
But we're talking about justice here, then what are superheroes if not that?
Well, so superheroes are, I think, very interesting because I see the whole superhero dichotomy as really a metaphor for spiritual combat. And spiritual combat, I feel like, is different because there is a clear evil. You are fighting against the evil that is going to make you unhappy. And there's no amount of harm that isn't justified to pure evil. Like, the problem with that harm to another person is that no one is pure evil. Mm-hmm. And that people can reform and improve, and dealing out the most punishment is not the way to do that. But assuming a world where a person was entirely 100% an evil monster, which I think the superhero universe oftentimes does, there is no amount of justice there's no amount of attack that is not justified in that case against pure evil.
Okay.
And I think that relates to sort of an internal struggle with bad habits, with negativity, with fear, with hatred in ourselves. We shouldn't be like, well, maybe I shouldn't be so mean to my hatred. Maybe I should be a little nicer to my bigotry.
Okay.
And so that's where I see this sort of superhero thing being useful. And that
makes total sense. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I guess it's not totally tied to the superhero thing, but I think this tendency is very sort of ironic in light of how much culture for the last decade, maybe two, has been so much of don't judge a book by its cover, don't put me in a box, I am more than what you see, don't take me at face value, when I feel like these sort of instant justice things are just entirely the opposite. It is saying this is who this person is summed up in 3 seconds. This is literally judging a book by its cover, taking everything else for granted. Which is a weird juxtaposition for people not wanting to be perceived that way. Yeah, I don't know. That's just an interesting little side thought I had. I'm not sure exactly where I was going with it. But.
Yeah, that I think it is a fascinating thing to look at. That I think
because humans want to put people in boxes and categorize things. It's just like a natural tendency,
But I mean, you literally have to as a means of survival.
Right.
Otherwise,
so
you would spend all day sitting like
it.
the thinker and just pondering and being
100%.
like, does Richard really suck? Or is he just kind of bad? And then there's a whole world in there.
Yeah.
But I think that the judgments we make are not so much for an actual condemnation of the other person, but for the functionality of ourselves, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Like if I'm walking down the street and I see people that look like scary to me in whatever way, I'm not going to be like, well, maybe they're nice guys. I'm in the middle of
to pick and choose.
Of a really bad area. But, I'll go talk to everyone I see. I think people will be nice guys. And I bet a lot of time they would be nice guys.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, the point is that we make those judgments for, like you said, self-preservation.
Yeah.
And taking it to a less extreme stance. If someone does something to hurt me, I will be less vulnerable with that person or spend less time around that person.
Right.
Because why would I engage in an interaction that's destructive?
Mm-hmm.
And so we make these judgments about like that person is bad, but I think the useful way to think about it is that person is not good for me.
I totally agree. But I also think that's why you have to be, the best way to live your life with something like that is you have to be very, very open and honest and immediate with people. The best way to deal with someone or some situation like that where someone who, you're friends with or you're even not even, but they've slighted you in some way is to address it as immediately as possible and just say like, this hurt me. You've hurt me right now. And gauge their response. Because most of the time, like you said, people are going to apologize and say, sorry, I will work on that. Most people aren't, out to get you genuinely. Yeah. And 90% of the time in my life when someone has like really done something to hurt me, and I have talked about it, they are genuinely upset as well because they weren't even aware.
And because usually if it's worth it for you to take the time to tell them how that made you feel, they're probably someone who's close enough to you that does, so they do care about you. And it's not just some like passerby that you'd like, hey, you suck. Yeah. You're not going to go up and be like, excuse me, can we have a conversation about this? Because that actually really hurt me.
Yeah, I feed into that a bit more than I should. People yelling at me.
Oh, yeah. You feed into it?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but
it's always the best one too.
When we were like maybe 14 or 15, this is actually a very formative experience for me, weirdly enough.
Really?
Yeah.
Like in all seriousness?
In all seriousness.
It's a good definition of Wes as a human being.
Okay.
In my memory also.
Continue.
I was a very different person in elementary school versus high school. Like, I was very quiet and very introverted in 7th and 8th grade, very awkward. And I remember this being one of those times where I was like, oh, I can be this person instead. And I think I like being this person more. Anyways, we were just walking to get sandwiches or something, and a bus full of kids pulled up at a red light, and some kid leans out the window and yells like, "You're gay," or something. Just calls me gay out of the window, and I turned around and went, "Oh, don't tell everyone, they don't know yet. I haven't even told my parents." And the kid was just completely bewildered and caught off guard. It was just like, how do I respond to that?
This wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah, he's just like, oh.
I didn't destroy him with that? What's my next play?
Yeah, I think that's just how you deal with random hecklers, because who cares at the end of the day?
I think that's a good way to deal with something that is like a one-off scenario like that.
Yeah.
But, you can't take the time with someone who's close to you. So you don't end up just taking things at face value, because I don't think that there's a lot of use to that. And even, like, a lot of the times in the Bible, taking things at face value, like God punishing people, you should be like, okay, well, God punished the children of Israel in this way, so I didn't do this when my kids misbehave. Mm-hmm. You can't stylize yourself after everything at face value. It takes a more holistic understanding, which is, again, harder to do and more clickbaity. Mm-hmm. So,
and also, even taking the Old Testament at face value, being like, God did X, so I should do X. You're not God.
Yeah.
It's weird.
What would Jesus do, though?
Yeah, but that's more like, what would Jesus do to be nice to people? Not
so it's a specific... You're putting Jesus in a box.
So what you're telling me is I should buy a whip and head down to Wells Fargo.
Let's do it, baby. We've talked a lot about the ways that these things are bad, but there are probably some circumstances where there's some positive thing that can come out of a situation like this, like the whole punch a Nazi sort of deal. So how do we deal with that thing?
Well, so go for it.
I wish I had like a hard line opinion on this, because that is something that I constantly find myself falling for, where I see, someone saying very vitriolic, violent stuff, and someone punches them or, anything, literally anything. And you're kind of like, good. But the inherent problem inside of that is it's completely diversive and doesn't help anything other than, in that one instance, shutting that person up. There is some value to that, I would say, especially at a demonstration or anything. However, the larger scale impact of that is arguably so bad that it's never worth it. It feels really good though. It feels nice, but the problem then is there's so many layers to this. Like, so who is a Nazi? Who decides who's a Nazi? What are the parameters for that look like?
Because you can't take the time to assess their whole worldview and philosophy and
exactly
narrow them down to being a Nazi.
Also,
right.
Even someone...
a very quick rundown of the situation that felt very satisfying, that essentially boiled it down to, the person might have any amount of complexity behind them, but Nazism as a philosophy is so destructive that to negotiate with it, to give it any more time than none, is to give it too much of a platform.
I completely agree.
To be stamped out.
You think there are things we shouldn't even hear out?
Well,
and that sounds like, I don't know.
But the thing is that person is not Nazism.
Yes.
That person is a person.
That's just it.
And so to stamp out a person, that's not.
Well, I don't think the idea is to say and crush them. It's to say, shut them up. Do not let them espouse those beliefs because they are so harmful.
But I think
way letting them speak can be useful.
To me, it always feels like
I think that's dangerous.
I don't think I agree with that, but I've heard it a bunch of times from people who have intelligent opinions.
To me, it seems like the way to shut up really divisive, hateful opinions is with group disdain. And I really think that is...
So the YouTube comment section.
Yes, the YouTube... No, but if an entire culture, whenever someone is like, I hate the Jews, was like, you're a horrible person for doing that. What a huge incentive that would
Never gonna work.
For people to not feel that way.
That's an impossibility.
And I think that's the argument, is that doing that is impossible societally. And so the only way to stamp it out is violence. Again, I don't agree with this, but I've heard a lot of people expound this.
I would say
viewpoint.
That absolutely it is something that like we should not allow, but there is a problem with this. Is something I was actually thinking about a lot last night. I've always grown up my whole life being fundamentally anti-censorship. Always, just across the board anti-censor. But that's censorship. That's literally what you're doing right there, is you're censoring Nazism. But then I'm like, but you probably should. But then if you do, you force it into a corner, and that's where it grows the best, in the dark, in the secret sea of like weird forums and stuff.
Yeah,
I think there's a difference between like arguing and trying to convince someone of something, and then silencing someone physically. There's a huge difference.
I think it's weird because, like I said, I feel like I'm floundering a lot because, like I said, I think about this all the time, and I don't have like a solid answer yet. But because on the one hand, there's a very good point that it like should just be eradicated. You were just talking about pure evils. What is redeeming about that philosophy? There's nothing. Yeah. Absolutely nothing. Unless you're one of those wacky statists. But anyways, that's a whole
I think
thing,
evils are always going to resurface. They're cyclical. Things happen. People are exposed to things and form their own ideas and identities based off comparison. And if there are things that crop up that people never give a voice to, they're going to hide in the dark and fester and infect in more harmful ways, I think, than letting them be a part of a rational and like peaceful sort of way.
Okay. Hold on, though. We can literally test this. Because if you go back 10 years ago, who was talking about Nazis other than Blues Brothers? It wasn't a thing that was mainstream.
Sure.
We could, if we had internet, we could literally look up statistics and say, has there been an increase in hate crimes? I mean, if you watch the news, you go, well, obviously yes, but I don't actually know.
Statistically, I don't know.
Yeah.
To me, I definitely feel like I have a lot of thoughts right now. I agree that it shouldn't be something that is allowed to be expressed freely, because that is, and we had a guest on a few weeks ago that shared a little bit of his what he's dealt with in terms of racism against people from the Middle East, against Islamic people. And that is, and I would say, more of an infringement on a person than to say, hey, you're not allowed to say hateful things.
Right.
And so to say, like, it's my freedom to socially oppress that person, that doesn't play. But I do think that we get into a dangerous area when we make the individual the arbiter of dealing out that justice. And a lot of people these days are very anti-government control over things. But I do think that this is like a role that government could do a good job in playing.
Of saying people can't say certain things?
About saying that people can't... I mean...
There are already rules about that, though.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
they just
like slander is against the law. You can't...
Inciting violence is against the law.
Yeah, inciting violence is against the law. Like, you can't... There are things you're not allowed to say, but people wave this big flag of freedom of speech.
I think you have to be super careful about that.
Of course. I agree. And not to get too political, but I think that freedom of speech doesn't mean I can say anything with no consequence ever.
Absolutely.
And I think people make it that, and I think it we're way off topic, but
I don't think it's way off topic.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't, that makes me uncomfortable. I feel like that's a huge slippery slope. And again, I haven't done tons of research, or I'm not an expert in the topic, so it's gonna be hard for me to really defend it. But it makes me uncomfortable just on a base level. Like, yeah, there are things like inciting violence or slander, or like wanting to cause physical violence to people, but I don't think. I'm trying to put words to it, but I don't think the government should be responsible for people's feelings getting hurt. And I know, like, saying racist things and inciting violence are very different, but I do think it can slide that direction.
Yeah, I agree. So I think it's a fine line there, but I think we already have a place that is too far, right? we don't live in a culture of total open free speech like we were just talking about. So we're already somewhere on that spectrum, right? And so to say moving even the slightest bit in that direction is a slippery slope, but we're already on that slope, right?
So I think we need to be more careful because we're already on the slope.
Well, I don't think that makes sense. I think that, would you say, okay, well, we don't want to be on this slope at all, so let's say thumbs up to people that want to make things up about other people and incite violence.
You could talk about, if we're going with your argument, there would be nothing wrong with talking about pedophilia openly on the internet or in real life. Because that's censorship. You're not allowed to do that. People do it.
Yeah, it's hard to draw lines with those things. Like, it's hard to figure out where the proper lines are.
I think a big thing, you guys are sort of simultaneously debating two issues. Because the punch a Nazi thing kind of comes down to, like, should it be government sanctioned to let that Nazi speak? Should it be government sanctioned to punch a Nazi? Or is it morally positive in an individual to punch a Nazi?
I got into this.
I think morally positive is more
I think those are good three things to analyze. So I think right now we've sort of been talking about government allowing or disallowing. I feel like we've covered that enough.
Yeah.
But on a personal level, I think you can't. I don't think you can say categorically either way, because I think so much of
say what other way?
Whether it is morally positive for a person to punch a Nazi, I don't think you can say categorically either way. I think that in the same circumstance, with the same event happening, it could be either very destructive for the person doing it or very positive for the person doing it. I think it comes down to motivation. What is that person promoting in themselves? Are they promoting a sense of defending people that can't defend themselves? Are they promoting a sense of equality? Are they promoting a sense of exerting their power over other people? Are they promoting a sense of just enjoying the feeling of their fist hitting flesh? Like, you don't know. And it could be something really noble, and it could be something really vile.
Right.
And so that's why I think it's not a place to say, this is on the person to do. I just, that feels like something that a higher level of organization needs to weigh in on. Because when we make ourselves the sole arbiters of justice, we can't see clearly. And that's why we need impartial arbiters of justice.
Yeah, but with things like freedom of speech, it's hard to be impartial about it. Like, unless you're banning specific words, I think the more... And again, this is something I don't really want to be on here because I don't really know how I feel about it, and I don't want it to be like taken a weird way. So
that's all I've been doing. Don't be a baby.
I know, but it's just something I'm more uncomfortable about.
Just put it in context. We'll see how it plays.
I feel like the more we go down restricting freedom of speech, it comes down to a more individualized form of law of saying, like, this is how I'm interpreting what someone's saying, so even if you said something to me that you didn't think was racist and then I thought was racist and I perceived as that,
right,
then can you be held accountable to the law for that because of how I perceive something?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
So it gets really messy.
It gets very into feelings, which is not something
and
you can
how
mandate.
Individuals perceive something, not how it objectively is.
Exactly.
Which makes it really difficult to police.
Well,
that's what it is.
That's why, like I said, I think it is good that we have things saying you can't start a riot. I mean, obviously. Where would we be if we didn't have that as a law?
Right.
But yeah, so I think you do need some of it.
And I think that there are things that are more clear cut. I don't think it would ever be like, hey, that person made a racist comment to me, so I can take them to court. Like, I don't think that's the level of... I think it needs to be a more public thing, because the more public it is, the more objective it is. And everyone was like, here's a video of a guy preaching to 15,000 people saying, we hate this minority group.
I think you could get a consensus, but you're just going off of mob mentality at that point, especially with something like Twitter. It's so easy to see something and for one person's very, like, wordy opinion to just read it and go, yeah, that's right, retweet. I'm not even going to think about it beyond what you just told me.
Well, but I'm saying that if everyone as individuals experiences it and agrees,
but you're not experiencing it individually, is what I'm saying. You're experiencing it, especially with Twitter, you're experiencing it through someone else's lens.
Yeah, but I think that's why it should be a governmental thing, because it's not like the Supreme Court is like, yo, what's going on Twitter, though? Like, they're trying
They
to...
kind of are.
Well, they shouldn't
in the UK
be.
Parliament just this week. Talking
They
about
shouldn't
memes.
be. So I guess I'm looking at more of an idealistic...
Well, let's continue on that idealistic trend and go into like spiritual justice. Like, what does that look like? Like, I'm trying to tie this back to the spiritual realm because we've gotten off on like a whole government tangent and like policing people and that kind of thing. So like,
yeah. It's an interesting question. How much can one person be like provide spiritual justice to another?
Or does it happen all on the individual level?
To
what
me,
even is that?
To me, it feels like it's inevitably a connection between that person and a higher power. Because nothing I can do to you can force you to change spiritually.
Right.
You know, like I can tie you up, I can lock you in prison, I can't make you not believe what you believe, right? Unless I like mess with your brain in some way. Like So I think this like spiritual justice has to be a self-implemented thing. Like I am going to be just with myself in the way that I act.
So how does like God employ justice?
Well, that's a big question. I think one thing to keep in mind is that justice is one piece of a two-piece puzzle, the way I see it, and that the other piece of that puzzle is mercy. And so this idea of justice is the structure that allows people to bump against unhappiness to bounce off to something better, right? Like if stewing in our evil never made us feel bad, we would just continue to get worse and worse and worse, right? There needs to be something that we can run into and bounce off of that lets us redirect our life. And that's, I think, what this idea of spiritual justice really is. I don't think it's anything happening to us physically in the world. I don't think it's like, I was a bad person and so I got hit by a truck today. Like, I also don't think it is external condemnation after death. I don't think it is, let me look at your book of life. You did 5 good deeds but 10 bad deeds, so I am sending you to hell. I think it's entirely inside a person. And the idea of justice, the justice we receive is the unhappiness that results from being awful to people.
What about you? What do you think, Wes? Like, is there justice beyond the law or like person to person vigilante?
Yes and no. I mean, it really there's a problem here because to me I think it comes more down to like what chemicals are more predominant than others in your brain. So for a let's say normal person, is that an offensive thing to say now? I don't even know. Let's say for the typical person out there, if you do something bad, like I said, unless it's unknowingly, which a lot of what I find the most fascinating is, you're probably going to feel bad about it at some point. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe when you're old, but at some point in your life, you're probably going to be like, I was a bad person
I
then.
wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah, you're going to have some regret. Unless, like I said, there's something with your brain that makes it so you just don't feel that way. I think that, like I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think a lot of that kind of morality comes from evolution and what's worked societally and how you were brought up, your own personal traumas. All of that comes down to create what your moral experience in life is. And unless you've been through some really traumatic stuff, which physically, just for background, trauma physically changes your brain.
Yeah.
The way it works and what chemicals are where is physically altered by incredible stress. And I think that, I mean, obviously that's going to mess with your morality, spiritual or not. So I think it depends how much you've been kind of messed up by life or from birth. if you don't have the right stuff, if you don't have the right tools to begin with, you don't even know that you're evil or what evil is or any of that. And you can be told that by religion or by, a philosophy or wherever you look. But if that's not what your brain is telling you is reality, then how can you ever understand that it is for everyone else? Like I said, different people in different people's heads.
All right.
But yeah, so is it? Are we just in a weird place right now where this is popular? I mean, I feel like it will sort of naturally, those titles will become less clickable. But is there a way to push back on it? I mean, for us, just not clicking on videos like that, even though they're interesting.
I feel like we've kind of moved past the video issue though.
But I think
I'm trying to just.
I think for me, embracing the mentality when we see this sort of like almost karmatic, satisfying justice, instead of having the mentality of like, oh man, that person got what they deserved, shifting to the mentality of like, look at two people engaged in clearly destructive behavior. Mm-hmm. Like, I wish neither of them had to be dealing with what they're dealing with right now. And that's such a shift.
Maybe it's such a problem now just because of how individualized society is becoming. And I kind of hate that sentence came out of my mouth because just like it's such a hot phrase, topic, buzz sentence. But
get us those likes, smash that subscribe button.
Elbow drop that subscribe.
Absolutely curb stomp it off the page.
But you can exist totally within yourself with social media, with your day-to-day life. That maybe everything is being framed for people increasingly just as it relates to me instead of trying to see other people.
Yeah.
In a rounded way, and so you want that instant karma because you don't really want to get to know other people?
Yeah, but I think that's all...
Is that the real problem?
Intentional, because that is a very profitable position for people to be in.
Or at least I think it appears that way. I think it appears profitable.
I think it is directly translates to more money being made by the powers that be, or
monetarily.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Zuck raking in that cash.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that this idea of I think there is something to that idea of when we look at the world and we enjoy seeing one person punish another, and we enjoy seeing the discomfort of that punishment. It's because we're not seeing that person as a person.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think it translates into our actions when we objectify other people, meaning make them less than people.
When we turn people into a meme? Meme lords left the building. But no, I think there's some... not to be too...
I think the individual culture thing is a super interesting rabbit hole because I feel like that exists through the easy internet, the Facebook internet.
Yeah.
But also the internet gives you 1,000 tools that all it takes is I wonder how this person thinks, and you can immediately find out.
And but when someone's just existing on Snapchat news, that people are so more prone to do easy internet, I think.
Yeah. I guess I wonder how much that really happens.
I think people are lazy, dude.
Yeah.
Too much more because then let's put yourself in the mindset of someone Fireside Chats was the first time you heard from the president, and your local newspaper was where you're getting all of your information, and you just simply didn't even have enough outlets to even consider media in the same way.
Yeah, but now you have Hillary Clinton dabbing for attention. But people's worldview is affected by what they surround themselves with.
Yeah.
And I think in a super meme-y culture right now, people are... No, I'm serious. People are more inclined to see human interaction in that sort of context.
Yeah.
And to put someone in that box or see someone as a meme waiting to happen.
Well, it's also an overall dehumanizing thing of the kind of disposability that someone becomes through the lens of Facebook or anything like that translated into the real world, wherein now blocking someone is such a concept that's ingrained to us. Not to get all Black Mirror, but I think nowadays more than at any point in human history. It's very easy and feels very convenient to just cut someone out of your life. How many times have you heard about someone being like canceled, or like even people's friends? They're just
and that goes back to echo chambers and that kind of thing, which we talked about before. Good episode, check it out. So
and that's a frightening concept. Like,
so people gotta put in work. People gotta put in work.
Right.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just about like conscious effort to see other people as people. And when you see someone experience pain, whether you think they deserve it or not, to realize that they're a more complex person than that one event.
Yep.
And to realize, try to connect with, like that's a real thing that's happening to someone.
Yeah.
Like
Everyone
when someone
has thoughts and feelings and
like that stupid video of some guy throwing a girl to the ground if she punches it a bunch of times. That's someone's head being slammed into a hard
that
floor.
actually happened.
Like that happened. And if that happened in front of you, you would be horrified by it.
Right.
Or at least I hope you would be.
Right.
And so connecting with the reality of what you're seeing, because it feels like the more we look at these and glorify them, the more that happens, and probably not to the same extent in real life, because there is a wall there.
Yeah.
But to the same extent, we get a mentality of it's okay to do this to people. It's okay to put people down when we feel when we as the arbiters think they deserve it.
That's why you have to be very careful what you put into your brain. I am not, and that's why I'm me. So take this as a warning.
Wes is Exhibit A.
So why espouse that but not live by it?
I mean, okay. I definitely like considering things from multiple angles, and what I'm trying to say, and clearly failing, is that I will sometimes, maybe at my own detriment, will try to push the boundaries of what I think and say, I want to empathize with this person, even if they're bad and awful, because like we've been talking about, like whatever his name is, Darren Devins.
You said Davids, but I don't know.
Yeah. Because I think for him to be in that position now, he had to do a lot of that, which sucks and is bad. And you have to be very careful about where you allow your brain to wander when you're not really thinking about anything, because that stuff comes back.
Some wise stuff right there.
Yeah, but I think if you're going into it with that mindset of like, I'm aware of what I'm doing and I'm aware that it's bad, and I just have to watch out for myself, that I'm hoping at the end of the day will lead to an increased strength in my own opinions and just an overall being more of a valid person.
Yeah. And I do think there's something to say, and I know we're winding down, but like to going into something like that or going to digest material like that, going into that really wanting to understand and empathize versus just wanting to strengthen your own defense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for that, but I think this focusing on not dehumanizing other people and seeking to understand them in what's happening to them.
Seek first to understand.
Yeah, so I think it really just boils down to understanding that people are people and that the pain they're experiencing is real, and that justice isn't about someone being hurt for doing wrong or someone being hurt for doing something to deserve it. It's about finding a way to help a person become a better person. And sometimes that has to be through setting limits for them or setting boundaries or setting punishments. But those punishments are a means to an end goal, not the end goal itself. That feels really important.
Yeah.
I like the conclusions I feel like we came to with this, because there's a lot of tricky stuff, and it's fun to like have little disparities in our own worldviews and perspectives and to disagree on some stuff. But I think coming to that kind of wholesome point of just try to seek first to understand, I feel like it's really what it comes down to.
I will say that no matter what, we're definitely all seemingly on the same page of it's best to try to understand first and empathize and put yourself in their position before you make a decision, because maybe there are times where that is the right answer to shut people down.
Loops all the way back around to what you were saying about your experience with religion back at the beginning.
Exactly.
Full circle.
Exactly. That's what I feel like the whole discussion has been about, is like
that's interesting.
empathizing with other people on it, and always trying to do it in a way deeper than you were before, because there's always layers to peel back with everyone. We're all complex, dynamic people, and you can just keep going down that rabbit hole if you want to. I say you should.
I feel like that's a thesis statement for the podcast. Not
There you
like
go.
this one, like the whole show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. But
Yeah.
thank you guys so much for watching and or listening to the Spiritable podcast. We had a great time here with Wes, making his third trip on as our guest. If you enjoyed the show, if you had a good time, help us out a lot if you subscribed or downloaded podcasts, left us a review. That's always a fun time. Leave a comment. We'd love to respond to that and see what people are thinking.
Yeah, if you liked this and wanted to see any more of our podcast, you can check us out in where you find a podcast, or on YouTube. You can check us out on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram at Grand Human Project.
Mother
or you
company.
can send us an email at spiritablepodcast@gmail.com.
And if
so
you want
much.
to contact Wes, just send a carrier pigeon.
Just go out and scream into the void. I'll show up.
He'll
I'm
be there.
always there.
See
He's
you
always
next time.
lurking.